Hello and welcome back to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, Effective Coaching and Feedback, sponsored by ELB Learning, Biz Library, Ariel Group, Leadership Progress Cycle, and Blue Point Leadership. So I'm Liz Spade, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. I love all the comments about taking notes. I have been taking notes as well, and let's continue this conversation in this next great third session we have. And so before we get started, I would love to go over those housekeeping items again to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. So for this session, please use that chat window to interact with our speaker with any comments, but as well as questions. Our speaker is going to try to address all the comments and questions throughout the event, but if she doesn't get to them, she will obviously address you an email later this week. But additionally, all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you'll receive a follow-up email from us today to the link to the on-demand sessions, as well as the PowerPoints. Now, if this is your first training industry event, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like live events like today's Leader Talk, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, our membership, and our podcast. We would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platforms for us to continue the conversation. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker. Joan is a highly skilled facilitator and coach with over 25 years of hands-on experience working with leaders at all levels and industries. She is noted for her passion for what she does and her energetic, interactive facilitation style. And her areas of expertise including helping organizations, team and individuals understand how to lift the performance of others, how to improve team execution by the way of innovation and creativity, and how to create an aligned and engaged organization to deliver on its vision. And with that, take it away, Joan.
Yeah, that's a mouthful, Liz. It's so nice to be able to spend some time with you all. I know you've spent a day looking at coaching, and my hope is throughout the course of our time together, you get some more tools, you get to add to those notes that you've taken already, and you'll leave with some resources as well. I'm delighted to be here. As Liz said, my name is Joan Peterson. I work for an organization called Blue Point Leadership Development, where we serve leaders all over the world, helping them develop skills in topics like coaching, emotional intelligence, communication, leading change, leading innovation, et cetera. We also have a team full of executive coaches all over the world. So excited to dive in to the topic around mindset to momentum. Really what we'll talk about is how can I build sustainable coaching practices inside my organization? So regardless of where your organization sits today around coaching, my hope is you'll leave with some practical tools, tips, strategies to move the needle a bit. Whether coaching is strong inside your organization or you're just beginning the process of bringing coaching into your organization, my hope is that you'll leave with some knowledge, resources, tools, et cetera. My hope is you'll also use the chat pod. I'll ask you to interact with the chat pod throughout the course of our session today. One of the questions that I typically ask leaders who come into our workshops is how many conversations do you have on a daily basis? I'm going to ask you to use the chat pod here. How many conversations do you have on a daily basis, including meetings, phone calls, one-on-one conversations, Teams messages, text messages? And then I'll share with you sort of the amounts that dozens, right? Too many. So I hear anywhere from, love that you're using the chatbot to GIFs count. I hear anywhere from, well, in the 20s to way too many. I can't even begin to count. And then the question I typically ask leaders, and I'll ask you the same thing. When you think about all those conversations, percentage-wise, how many of those would you say are meaningful? That is, the other person leaves engaged, inspired, aligned, maybe with a piece of feedback. And the percentage I hear is what I'm seeing in here, like 5%. Sometimes they just say 100%. Well, we know that's not true. Like if we're fooling ourselves, because not all conversations need to be meaningful. But our belief is when we start to bring coaching and coaching skills into organizations, leaders have more meaningful conversations. They make conversations matter. Our belief is leadership happens one conversation at a time. So how can we help ourselves and those around us have better conversations. And coaching, of course, enables us to have better conversations. I know many of you have joined the sessions that have taken place so far. So the likelihood is you've talked about the benefits of coaching. Love for you to pop some of those in the chat pod. What are the benefits that individuals derive from being coached, that organizations derive from being coached, that teams derive from being coached? What are the benefits of coaching? And again, would love for you to share some of what you've experienced, some of what you've seen inside your organization. Love it. They're valued and not a number. And morale, stronger workforce, productivity, trust, more buy-in. Absolutely. What you're putting in the chat pod, much better than what I have on the slide here. Because again, it's from your own experience. We know that there's a tremendous benefit of coaching, from retention to growth to building an organization culture that people want to be a part of. And we also know that coaching matters today. My belief is more than ever. If we look at some of the data that's out there, some of the work that 6 Seconds does on EQ talks about the fact that our global emotional intelligence has taken a bit of a dive post-pandemic. And we know that coaching impacts emotional intelligence. The top 10 skills for 2025 EQ skills. And we know coaching drives that. We also hear a ton around burnout. Specifically, a large percentage of professionals have experienced work-related burnout. We also know there's, in the healthcare industry, there's a dollar amount attached to it. Tons of research that coaching impacts burnout as well. Now, the piece of data that's not on here, Neuroleadership Institute, in organizations with a coaching culture, they saw a 51% increase in productivity and revenue. I mean, that's a pretty significant piece of data. You may have heard Korn Ferry's work around this idea of imposter syndrome. 50+% of leaders, whether they're supervisors through CEO, feel some type of imposter syndrome. And we know some of the recent data tells us that coaching impacts this idea of self-confidence, which impacts imposter syndrome. So lots of reasons why coaching matters today. Bit about how we'll go through our time today. We'll look at some myths. We'll look at a coaching process. Throughout the course of the time, I'll share some tools and resources that will either pop in the chat pod or you'll have access to after. So let's kind of level set. Again, I know you've been talking about coaching most of the day. What does great coaching look like? And how we typically ask leaders to kind of pinpoint, well, what does coaching look like? How do I know it when I see it? We ask leaders to think about who was their personal best coach. And I'm going to ask you to think about it for yourself. When you think about who was the person who was your personal best coach, inside or outside work, maybe someone you work with now, or someone that you worked with as a teen or first job, who was the person that you would say made a difference for you? And we ask leaders all over the world to talk about their personal best coach. And then I'm going to ask you to put in the chat pod, what was it about that person that caused you to choose them? Authentic and transparent. They made me feel valued, right? They believed in me. And I love that with my husband. I think that we can find coaches all over, inside organizations, outside organization. They cared about me. They pushed me out of my comfort zone. So in the workshop, you could imagine the energy when people start to talk about the person who made a difference for them. And then we ask them to add a table groups to compile a list of 5 to 7 things that those coaches have in common. And it's all the things that you're putting in the chat pod here. In fact, it didn't matter where we sat, whether we sat in the United States or we sat in the Asia Pacific region. The lists looked the same. So what we know is that great coaching looks like this. And it's all the things you put in the chat pod. It looks like someone who encourages me, who believes in me, someone who challenges me, gives me feedback, saw something in me I didn't see in myself. We also know that great coaching, by looking at these lists, are 2 really distinct skill sets. One is more the nurturing skills. They listened to me, they cared about me, they invested in me. And the other is the ability to have difficult conversations. They confronted me, they gave me tough feedback, they told me the truth. And I'll challenge everyone in this room, whether you're a certified coach or not, as you look at the list, which of these would those around you want more of? And when you look at your organization, which of these would you most want to develop inside your organization? So I think if this is what great coaching looks like, one of the ahas for the leaders who come through our workshops around coaching is, oh, I don't see advice on the advice doesn't make the list. And for many leaders, they thought coaching was giving advice. So we set up very early that coaching and advice very different. Advice important, direction important. I'll talk about those both later. But how do we help leaders to see that coaching isn't that? And what does it look like instead? So that's what great coaching looks like. I'd like to talk a bit about the process. We'll first start by looking at selection. How do I identify those who how do I identify candidates for coaching? Then we'll look at the process specifically. How do I identify the right coaching engagement or the right coach? How do I prepare the person being coached, the talent, we call them the talent, and the coach, and then measurement. How do I measure progress? How do I measure results? And along the way, I'll share some of the myths based on, gosh, I've been in the industry over 30 years. Some of the things that I think are myths that I think we talk about, and we need to start debunking those myths inside our organizations. And we'll end with this idea of communicating and capturing success stories. So let's start first with this idea of selection. And this is a question that we get asked quite frequently. Well, Joan, how do you select the right candidates for coaching? And like any consultant, our response is this: well, it depends. And I think it does depend. How do I select the right candidates for coaching depends on what I'm looking to accomplish. So when we think about who are typical candidates for coaching in your organization, I'm going to ask you to use the chat pod here. When you think about coaching, who are the typical individuals inside your organization who are on the receiving end of coaching? And again, I can share with you what I've heard from many. So it's director and above, it's executives, top of the house, right? So sometimes it's young leaders, it's high pose, poor performers I hear inside lots of organizations. Tammy, love that, everyone. I do think, and here's the typical response we hear, and I think it's a myth, that coaching should be reserved for top of the house, high potentials, and fix-its. And again, I think it's a myth because we know the benefits of it? Shouldn't it be accessible to all? And I recognize that that's aspirational. And I also wonder, as you look at the coaching landscape inside your organization, are you able to move the needle? Are you able to shift to whomever it's offered now, shift it a little bit more? And again, my hope is that I'll share some thoughts, some practices that maybe would be helpful in moving the needle inside your organization. I do want to talk about fix-it coaching. I think, and we see this inside a lot of organizations, that before you leave, before we move you out the door, we give you one last chance and we get you an external coach. Think about what message that sends to the organization. It sends the message that problems get coaching. So I don't want to coach because that means I'm on my way out the door. And I think that's a challenge. I think more of a challenge is this, that we look at, okay, we bring in an external person to help sort of fix our poorer performers. And what message does that send? Can we, again, look at coaching from a global perspective, that it's not just for the poor performers, it's not just for the high potentials, it's not just for the top of the house. How can I make it more accessible to all? What would it look like in your organization if people had more access to coaches? So let's look at, okay, well, we're looking to increase access to coaches. How do I identify the right coaching engagement or the right coach for whomever it is that I'm looking to get coaching? And we get asked this question as well. Well, how do you match the talent, the person being coached, with the right engagement? And again, I think it depends, right? It depends on who the talent is. It depends on what your budget is. It depends on the length of the engagement, around what you're looking to develop. And I do think this is another myth. If you have the budget, external coach is always better. And I'm an external coach, but I think sometimes we need to look inside. We need to look at what capabilities do we have inside. Sometimes, yes, external coaches are appropriate, but I do think that there are opportunities inside organizations to expand how we look at coaching. Of course, my guess is, there are different modalities of coaching: external coaching, internal coaches, managers and leaders using coaching skills, and AI coaching. like to do a bit of a poll here. And I'm going to ask you to put into the chat pod which of these modalities are currently being used inside your organizations. So if you use all of them, you'd put 1, 2, 3, 4. If you just use external coach, you'd put 1, etc. Love it. So I see lots of 3s, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm looking at them very, very quickly. Lots of 3s, which I love. I see a couple of 4s, which I think is kind of new to some organizations. I'll talk a little bit about AI coaching, some internal coaches, etc. I do think this was some research that was done between ICF and HCI, our sister organization. This is the trend we're seeing. Notice how AI coaching isn't even on here. My guess is the next survey AI coaching will be on here. We're seeing an increase in using managers and leaders as coaches inside organizations, so equipping them with coaching skills. We're also seeing an increase in external coach practitioners, bit of a decrease in internal coach practitioners, which I'll talk a bit about too, because I think sometimes we get that wrong. So again, just to look first at this idea of external coaches. We know that there are pros and cons to external coaching, and you'll have access to the slide deck. And the pros and cons are pretty familiar to you. My guess is nothing earth-shattering here. Quite often, there's an unbiased perspective. There's a high degree of trust. There's the cons, higher cost. They're unfamiliar with the organization. And again, sometimes external coaches are the best options. So how do you choose an external coach? And I think this is what we hear all the time. It's like, okay, Joan, we want a coach for this person, but they need to have experience in that industry. I think that's a total miss. And I think it's a myth. I think we shut ourselves off. I think they need to have experience, and they need to have experience coaching and whatever you're looking to equip the talent with. But I don't think they necessarily need experience in that industry to be effective. I think as practitioners, we need to look at best practices for choosing the right external coach. Yes, they need to be educated and accredited. Yes, they need relevant experience, not necessarily industry experience. Ethical standards and philosophy, I think it's important to talk about that with a coach before you bring them into your organization. References, absolutely. The next two, I think a lot of organizations miss. And that is, do we give the person being coached a choice? Some organizations have their executive coaches, their go-to pool, and we use this one, we're going to pair them up. Really, the best fit is when the talent trusts them, when the talent feels like it's a coaching style match. Are we getting the talent involved in the process? And one of the tools, again, you may not need this, but if you do, if your talent needs some coaching questions or screening questions that they could ask potential coaches, I think these are really good ones. Tell me about your coaching approach and philosophy. What have you found to be the qualities of your ideal talent? What do you consider to be success in a coaching engagement? It helps me build a relationship before I'm matched up. So if we look from external coach to internal coach, again, pros and cons, my guess is nothing earth-shattering here. I think the pros are it's cost effective. There's an ability to observe the talent in a work setting where I can give feedback. The cons are sometimes there's not as much coaching experience as an external coach. There may be some biases. Sometimes there's potential credibility depending on who the talent is. So some pros and cons. I do think that, and I see this myth is starting to go away a bit, but I used to hear, well, we can't bring an internal coach. Like we're not hiring a full-time coach and having them sit on our team. Now we see HR business partners coaching. I think the myth now is internal coaches need to coach full-time and they need to come from HR. I don't think they do. I think we expand our accessibility to coaching when we look at building internal coaches who maybe don't sit in HR. We've worked with organizations to build coaching skills where they sit as internal coaches in engineering, in marketing, in sales. And typically the people who they choose to want to be part of it, and then they do spend a small portion of their time coaching, but they keep their day job. So it's not an extra, part of their time is coaching. But are we looking as that as an option? I think one of the ways we can identify and select internal coaches is looking at who's interested, who has taken coaching workshops, who is known as a coach inside the organization. And I think then we need to serve them well. We need to set up percentage of time that you'll be coaching. We need to match them up. We need to provide support. We need to monitor and evaluate the process. Some of the feedback I've gotten from some of the organizations we worked with is the coaches, the internal coaches, need to set a beginning and end to their coaching engagement, because it started to catch on that they had too many coaching clients. And it was, oh, I have to kind of break up with people. So part of what we need to help our internal coaches do is to recognize that it's not, I'm your coach forever. I'm your coach for 6 months or whatever the timing is. Again, that's a lesson learned along the way. I also think, and I'd like to spend some time on managers and leaders as coaches, because I think we get some of that right. And I think we get some of that not so right. And the first myth, my guess is this isn't a myth for you all. You wouldn't be on this call, that coaching is a soft skill. It's not. It's a technical, practical ability that is acquired through training, education, experience. So if we want our managers and leaders to be good coaches, we need to find a way to get them those practical, technical skills, get them training, get them experience, get them feedback. Right. I mean, coaching isn't about a person. Oh, yeah, you have the personality of a coach. No, it's a hard skill. So tons of advantages of training managers and leaders as coaches. And this came out of Gallup just 2 weeks ago, that teaching managers effective coaching techniques can boost performance by 20 to 28%. So are we investing in our managers? Are we teaching them coaching skills so that we can get some of the benefits, so that we can make coaching more accessible to all? Some of the best practices, and my guess is for many of you, you're already doing this, right? It's making sure people get practice and feedback on coaching. I think the big miss I see inside organizations is that we teach people the doing of coaching, whether it's a model or a set of tools, but we don't talk about the being of coaching. Like, I don't get to be your coach because I'm your manager. I need to earn the right to do so. Are we helping our leaders with the mindset of coaching, not just the skill set? And I do think that how do we build sustainable coaching practices? It starts with our managers and leaders, and it's not just about skill set. It's about mindset, and it's about mastery. So I think helping our leaders recognize that they need to earn the right to coach, and even asking them, well, what earns you the right? What earns the right of others to coach you? And I'll ask you all the same thing. What does someone need to do for them to earn the right to coach you? And are you showing up that way to those around you? Like, without that, I don't get to be your coach. I could be your parent. I could be your manager. And if I haven't earned the right to coach, you're not going to engage in a coaching conversation with me. I need, as a leader, to choose to want to coach you. And you need to choose to want coaching from me. Yeah, I think I want, and I love that you put that in the chat pod, like, build a relationship of trust. Without it, there's no coaching. And typically when we start to talk about earning the right to coach, someone in the room always asks this: well, how do I coach the uncoachable, Joan? And some of you may have been wondering that as well. And I think quite often we think about people as, oh, that person has earned the right for me to coach them, instead of the other way around. Like, I wonder, and here's what we talk about in the workshops when someone talks about coaching, how do you coach the uncoachable? I believe that most people want to do a good job. I believe that most people want to add value to the organization. And if that's the case, I believe most people want coaching. So if someone's showing up as uncoachable, I wonder, do they just not want coaching from you or me? And we ask leaders to shine the light on themselves just for the time being. Is there something you're doing that's causing them to not want coaching from you? And I think that's a huge myth. Some people are just uncoachable is a myth. I think sometimes we are not showing up as coaches inside organizations. I do love this quote, and it's one we share with leaders: treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you help them to become what they're capable of being. Do we see people as human beings with potential and treat them as such? When we see people as human beings with potential, then we start to not see this uncoachable person show up inside our team. One of the resources that you'll have access to, I do think it's important that we equip leaders with tools. One of the tools that we equip leaders with who go through our workshop are 60 big coaching questions. Likelihood is you've equipped your leaders or equipping leaders with like tools, but we wanted to share that with you. You can access it through the link online, the link that's on the slide here. Again, 60 big coaching questions in a bit of a process. I do think, and my guess is for those of you who are teaching coaching skills, and Hannah just put it in the chat pod as well, give tools, that you give processes to your managers and leaders. I think one of the misses that I see when we're teaching coaching skills is helping leaders recognize, when do I coach? And I think, and this is a chart that we use, is the secret sauce of leadership. My belief is that leaders know the difference between directing, advising, teaching, mentoring, and coaching, and they know when to do which. So coaching, you leave a coaching workshop, you're not going to use coaching all the time. There are times where giving advice is the most important thing you can do in the moment. So when we're teaching coaching skills, my belief is if we don't teach people when to use it, we're not increasing accessibility to it. So directing, when do I direct? What does it look like? Advising, what does advising look like? When do I do it? Teaching, what does that look like? And coaching, when do I coach? I don't think we coach. I think we can be coach like. Yeah, I love that. ABC always be coaching. Like, I think we can be coach like, but coaching isn't always the right tool to pull out of our bag. Sometimes we need to be directive. And again, I think if we don't help leaders see the difference, then we're not helping equip leaders to be the best possible leader they can be. I also think that we need to help leaders apply coaching skills. And I think that a lot of coaching workshops use role play. And I always ask this question when I'm with a group of leaders to say, how many of you like role plays? And like typically 1 to 2 people raise their hand and everyone else is looking to run screaming from the workshop. I think role play, not a lot of instructional value in coaching. We use real play. What is that? It means that you come in with real life challenges, you get coached on real life stuff. So you not only get great coaching from your colleagues, but when you're practicing coaching, you don't have to pretend to be anyone else. You're coaching that person on something that's real for them. So I think that's critically important, is how do you help people coach in a real life setting and get them feedback on it? I think another way we can make coaching accessible to all and sustainable inside organizations is when we recognize that we don't just have to offer one-on-one coaching. I think there's opportunities inside organization to coach teams, to coach groups, to coach, to have systemic coaches and team coaches and one-on-one coaches. And I also think, and I'll talk a little bit about coaching circles. Coaching circles is a way that I think you sustain coaching practices inside organizations. We have worked with organizations post workshop. So you go through a coaching workshop, leaders and managers, and then they participate in what we call a coaching circle. Typically, it's a small group, anywhere from 4 to 10 people. And the intention of it is to practice coaching in a safe setting on real life stuff. So if it's post workshop, we talk about what commitments did you make? What do you want to work on? What are the first 3, psychological safety. Then we spend a great portion of our time where somebody brings a challenge that they're having and they get coached on it one-on-one. So let's say that Hannah and Liz and I are in a coaching circle and I have the challenge. Hannah would coach me for a few minutes and then Liz would coach me for a few minutes. And then after, Hannah and Liz would both get feedback on their coaching. This enables you to have leaders practice coaching, enables leaders to get coaching on real life challenges. And it's a fantastic opportunity for leaders to see coaching. And one of the things that I would like to invite you to is, if you are not using coaching circles and want to see what it looks like, then I'd like to invite you to a complimentary coaching circle with some of the colleagues who are on this call. So here's how this will go, because I know sometimes people are like, well, I'm going to get on a call with people I don't know. An hour and a half, May 16th or May 22nd, we would start by introductions. You get to meet people in the industry. We would do a quick recap. What does great coaching look like? We'd get you the 60 big coaching questions, and then we'd have 2 of you would be coached by the rest of the group. And we talk about what does great coaching look like. What this would enable you to do is to experience a coaching circle so you can bring it back to your organization. I'll be hosting them. So if you're interested, there's an email address there. Limited spots because we want to keep them small. But again, if you're interested, we'd love to share this. I think it's a really good practice to start to build this accessibility to coaching inside organizations. I know there was a question about how would you approach building a coaching culture starting at the executive level. One of the questions we sometimes get asked is better to start at the top or better to start at the bottom? And one of the organizations we're working with has done both. So if I have executives who are bought in, then I would say yes. Like if you're bought in, how do we equip those executives with coaching skills? And I think for coaches, for executive team, it's more important to look at how do I build a coaching culture? What are characteristics of a coaching culture? And then what's their role in building that coaching culture? So again, I wonder, and I love that question, and I'm happy to engage in a conversation offline around if you have top of the house buy-in, great opportunity to start to build that into practice. How do we make coaching accessible? I think for those organizations who are starting to build coaching, we start with one-on-one coaching. We build our managers and leaders skills. If one-on-one coaching already exists, whether internal, external, managers and leaders as coaches, AI coaching, have you looked at team coaching? And what about systemic coaching? How can you build some of those skills into the organization? One of the other resources that we have, and this one we won't pop in the chat pod, but you can look at, again, when you get the slide deck. If you're interested in team coaching, it's a resource. It's based on the GROW model, some GROW questions for team coaching. You'll see they look a little bit different than the one-on-one coaching skills. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about AI coaching nowadays, right? Because we see AI coaches popping up and there are pros and cons. I think the pros to AI coaching is that accessible 24/7, scalable. I think there are tons of cons to AI coaching. I'm not sure that we yet know about, sort of the confidentiality. I think we're getting really good at it. Limited contextual understanding. There are algorithms that are predetermined. I do think that there is a place for AI coaching. I do think it complements human-led coaching. I wonder if AI coaches can serve us post-workshop if the AI coach is equipped with the algorithm of what's taught in the workshop, might they be a good add to a workshop to help people start to build whatever skill or competency or commitment they've made after? I do think what AI coaches can't do is they can't show empathy currently. I also know that they don't understand the tone and body language. So when I coach someone, whether I'm in person or on a call like this, I know when the words and music don't go together. I know if you say you're going to do this and your body language says otherwise, and I'll call you on it. An AI coach can't tell the difference. And I also think one of the other things that an AI coach can't do currently is celebrate success. I don't think we do that enough. Change is hard. So when we're making advances, one of the things that a human coach can do, I think, more effectively than an AI coach is celebrate success. So I do think there are places for AI coaching, and I think it's finding the right space and knowing what the pros and cons are. Let's talk a little bit about preparing the talent and the coach. We ask this question all the time. Well, how do you prepare the talent? I think we do a better job of preparing the coach. Like, can we and do we prepare the talent? What can they expect? All right, so you're getting a coach. What can you expect? What's expected of you? Do they know about how safe it is? Do they know that this is just between them? Do they know the process? Do they know their role, the coach's role? And our belief is that, and we have an article that, again, you have access to. I think Hannah's going to pop this in the chat pod too. Getting the most out of leadership coaching. Do we help our talent get the most out of it? Now, you can use this, but my recommendation would be to take a look at this and make it your own and help your talent understand what's going to happen. You're not going to get a ton of advice from your coach. What can they expect? What's their role in it? I think, how do we best prepare the coach? And again, I think organizations are quite good at this. Coaching intake forms, assessment, stakeholder interviews. I want to make sure that I do leave time for this. I know there was another question. Are the 60-day coaching questions used to identify coaches? They're for coaches to use while they're coaching. So the first one is like, how can we make this conversation most useful for you? So they're questions that the coach would use when they're coaching. Yeah, thanks for that question. Like to spend a few minutes looking at measurement because it's one of the questions that, and again, it's a question we get, and I think it's a myth. Say, well, you can't measure the impact of coaching. Like, I think you can. Do I think it's easy? I don't think it's easy. So again, organizations ask us this all the time. Well, how do you measure the ROI? And I think it depends. It depends on what are you looking to do? What are you looking to accomplish? I think we can measure the ROI of coaching when we know what we're looking to measure. Is it retention? Is it morale? Is it promotions, bench strength? Like, what are we looking to measure? And once we know that, it's setting up a process to measure it before and after. We do have a tool for you that Hannah, I think, is going to pop in the chat pod as well. And it's strategies. It can help you think about strategies to evaluate the ROI of coaching. And really it starts with, what are you looking to measure? And once you know what you're looking to measure, this can help you think through, okay, what might I want to do? What are some of the things that I could do in order to measure that? Three sort of case studies, examples of organizations that were looking to measure something specific and what they did to get there. So Mayo Clinic, this was pre-pandemic. They were looking at burnout amongst their mid-career physicians. And they hired Blue Point external coaches to see if coaching made a difference. And of course, they found out that it did, that there was a significant correlation between those who received coaching, those mid-career physicians who received coaching, and those characteristics associated with burnout compared to the control group. And these weren't long coaching engagements. They were half-hour coaching sessions over the course of a few months. And so it wasn't a tremendously long engagement, and there were only half-hour coaching sessions. And they saw a significant correlation between that and drop in burnout. They repeated the study with surgeons post-pandemic, same kinds of results, that there was an impact between coaching and burnout. Enbridge wasn't looking at burnout. They were looking at, can we change our culture? And they were looking at changing their culture from more of a top down, more of a command and control, to more participative leadership. And they chose not to use external coaches, although they used a little bit of external coaching. They did more training their managers and leaders as coaches. And then they used the managers and leaders that they trained as coaches to coach different. So they kind of trickled down. So the executives started, and those coached the next group, and those coached the next group. They also worked their way up. So they measured by looking at, what's our culture look like? Cleveland Clinic, this was during the pandemic, they were looking at retention, and they used internal coaches, and they attached a dollar amount to it. So Mayo used external coaches, Enbridge used training their managers and leaders as coaches, and Cleveland Clinic used internal coaches, but all looked to measure different things. And once you know what you're looking to measure, you're going to be much more successful because you know what to put into place in order to measure that. One of the things that I think we don't talk about enough when it comes to measurement is, are we capturing and communicating success stories? Now, I recognize that there is confidentiality in the coaching space, but I wonder, do organizations ask the talent? So you just participate in this coaching engagement with an external coach, or your leader or manager just got some coach training and they've been coaching you. Like, what has changed for you? When some of the organizations we've worked with have gone to their talent and said, hey, anything you want to celebrate? What did you uncover, discover? They found that they could actually attach dollar amounts to some of those stories. And some was culture change, but there are specific examples of, if I didn't get coached, I wouldn't have done that, and it saved the organization this amount of money. And I don't think we do enough of that. And again, it protects confidentiality because you're going to the talent. So my hope is that as we've walked through the coaching process, that as we've looked at the 8 coaching myths, you walk away with a few, again, thoughts, best practices, things you might want to do differently inside your organizations, things that might be helpful for you as a leader and as a coach. I do think one of the gifts we can give those around us is when we recognize that coaching is many different things. I think quite often we think coaching is this formal, ongoing, it's our one-on-ones. It's I have a coaching engagement where I have a set time where we meet weekly or monthly. I think if that's our only definition of coaching, we're not going to make coaching accessible to all. Can we help ourselves and our leaders recognize that great coaching happens in the moment as well? Are we able to, in the moment, ask a question that helps people think differently? Are we able to offer feedback? Are we able to acknowledge or affirm? Once we see that coaching in the moment is impactful, I think we start to make coaching accessible to all. Our founder, one of the questions I'll ask leaders is, how long do you think is the ideal coaching conversation? And typically you hear, well, it's 15 minutes, it's 30 minutes, it's an hour, however long their one-on-ones are is typically what leaders share with me. The founder of our organization shared this story, which is, I think, extremely impactful. He said 2 conversations that he had have been the most important conversations and have really helped him learn, grow, develop as a human being. He said, started his career as an engineer, sitting in a leadership development workshop. Facilitator came up to him after the workshop and said, you remarkable skills around coaching and leadership. They seem to come really naturally for you. Wonder, have you ever thought of investing more time or spending more time in your career in the leadership development field? He was an engineer. He said it was a 30-second conversation, and it sat with him. And eventually he started a leadership development company. And he said the other conversation he had was with his dad. And he said his dad asked him this question every time he saw him. He said, are you doing work that's meaningful? Are you doing work that helps other people? Are you doing work that makes a difference? He said, for 30 years, my dad asked me that question. So he said, perfect, ideal coaching question could be anywhere from 30 seconds to 30 years. Are we helping leaders see that they can make a difference? Those 30-second conversations, or those conversations that they have continuously. That's how we build a coaching culture. That's how we build a universal coach-like approach. I think my hope is when we leave here, we look to make the conversations that we have matter. And we look to help our leaders have conversations that matter. My hope is that this, again, has been helpful for you. My email address is there. Blue Point's email address is there. Please reach out if you have questions. If there's anything that I can be helpful with, I'd be happy to connect. As well, if you're interested in that coaching circle, please let us know. We do, from a product perspective, we offer a leaders coach workshop where we help leaders become better coaches. And we, of course, offer executive coaching. And beyond that, though, if we can be helpful or serve you in any way, please let us know. I do thank you for spending the time with us. I'm going to hand it back over to Liz, and so grateful for you using the chat pod and participating.
Yes, no, this was a great conversation. Obviously don't want to take up anybody's spot in that leadership circle, but if they don't take it, I might be joining. That sounds so much fun. And such a great opportunity. So definitely jump on that as well. But thank you so much, Joan. This was great.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, everyone.
Of course. So we are going to give you some time back just a little bit. We are going to typically take a 15-minute break, but it seems like we'll be taking a little bit more. So just definitely get some food, snacks, all those good things. But while we're taking that break, up next, we do have Jared Oates from Leadership Progress Cycle for their session, The Feedback Fix, Preparing Leaders to Coach Effectively and Drive Results. So again, in a moment, I'm going to end this session. You can join our next session by returning to the event lobby and going to the session tab. I hope to see you next time, and I hope to stick around for the next session, which will begin at the top of the hour. See you guys soon.
Thanks, everyone.